Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaoatman.com. Welcome to Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness, a daily podcast devoted to spirituality and self-help. If you're new, I want to welcome you. If you're returning, welcome back. So today we have a very special guest with us, and I'm very excited to have Mr. Michael Lees with us here. He is a filmmaker and a director, and he has just released his new film called Uncivilized. And I have to tell you, I have gotten to see a sneak peek of this movie, and it is just phenomenal so far what I've seen. So I'm so excited to talk to him today. So welcome, Michael.
Hey, Melissa, thanks for having me.
So how about if you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and how you decided to make a movie, because I find that so interesting. I know I wrote a book, and for me, that was a very difficult thing to do. It was not easy to undertake, and I know filmmaking has to be so much more difficult than that. So I'm very interested to see how you decided to create this movie.
Cool. Well, that's a big question, so keep me on track if I go too wide. I was born in England. My mother is originally from Barbados. My dad's English. And then we moved to Dominica, which is not to be mistaken with Dominican Republic, little Eastern Caribbean island, when I was 5. And then I ended up going to school in the States. And then I returned in 2016 when I was pretty much sure I wanted to come home. And I also wanted to come and make this project. In terms of what drove me to make the film specifically, I think there were a few things. One was, right now we're only talking about COVID, but the other sort of like existential threat that we've been dealing with is climate change. And I think what I experience is what I see a lot of the young climate activists like Greta Thunberg experiencing, which is almost like a sort of existential like dread and depression from this idea that the world may be coming to an end or getting ruined in a way that we won't be able to come back from, and nothing is really being done about it. So I had this idea that just maybe if we could kind of go back in time, if we could have been satisfied with the lot that we were given, maybe we could have avoided all of these pitfalls. Because the way I kind of see it, it's our constant desire for more and more and more that eventually is kind of going to have us implode on ourselves. So I think that was a big part of it. I think another part was personally sort of feeling trapped and unfulfilled by America and New York, work, all the things that a lot of people are aspiring to, and just feeling very cut off from everything and just being like, you know what, again, maybe the answers really were in this quote unquote Eden that may have existed before.
That's very interesting. And I think a lot of people are, especially now, starting to see not only the damage we've done to the planet, but also how material things are not the things that really fulfill you. I think that is becoming very evident to a lot of people these days. Would you agree with that?
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
So now I know that your film is going to premiere at the San Francisco Indie Doc Film Festival. So you could tell us maybe a little bit about your film itself, and more about what the film really is about to you, and then where people might be able to also check this film out if they'd like to watch it for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just start with where it's streaming. It's on Studio Anansi, ANANSI.TV, and then /Uncivilized. But Studio Anansi TV is where it's streaming. On the surface, the film essentially became a story of survival, because I decided to go out to live in the forest to sort of try and test these theories that I had and see if it was something that was palatable to me. And then halfway through, Category 5 Hurricane Maria hit the island, and it was a direct hit. It stayed over Dominica for the entire night. and I was out in the forest in a palm leaf and bamboo hut, and somehow basically survived miraculously without a scratch. Um, and then, from there, we the film kind of morphs, not just, it still kind of is a first person doc, so focused on my journey and the people I come into contact with, but then it morphs into a story of survival for the island. Now, we didn't have electricity or running water or internet for at least like 6 months. But the really interesting thing, Dominica is known as the Nature Isle of the Caribbean. So we're in many ways, quote unquote, undeveloped compared to a lot of places. But because we still have access to clean water and fresh springs, rivers to go and bathe in, it's an agricultural society, so there was no shortage of food, small communities. Because of all these things, which are in a way have been lost in a lot of, again, quote unquote, developed places, we were actually able to get by quite gracefully. And I think it was also an opportunity, as everyone was basically cut off the same way I was when I was in the forest. It slowed things down. And I think in slowing things down, that gave everyone a chance to really, yeah, meditate on what was important in life, especially when so much material stuff was taken from us, and then you're just thankful to have the clothes on your back.
Yeah, I think that is such a profound thing when people finally are able to be shown these are the things that really matter and these are the things that are important. I know before all of this, before the pandemic and everything happened, I could recall going to restaurants and just looking around and seeing people on their phones and not even conversing with the people sitting at the table with them. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, what have we become as a society where you go to spend time with your family and you're not really, like, you're there, but you're not really there because you're not present with your family members and really enjoying their company and making connections. And even in young people, I see that, instead of being present in the classroom and wanting to really be there and experience the lessons, it's more like, okay, I'm looking at my phone and what's the next thing, and it's like instant gratification instead of cultivating relationships with people and experiences, like going outside. I mean, I remember as a kid we were told to go outside and don't come back until the street lights came on because that was our babysitter, right? It was go do things that kids should do, like climbing trees and whatever. So I think that there's a whole generation of kids who really haven't experienced that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that what I'm sure you've touched on this many times before, but the importance of presence, because if, again, essentially both past and future are constructs, and a lot of times if you're worrying about the future, you become anxious, and about the past, you become depressed, and all that really exists is the present. And even if you were to talk about having any sort of um, spiritual awakening or encounter with God, where would it happen if not the present? And so for me, especially being out in the forest alone and just kind of, again, witnessing everything going on around, there's so many things going on. Life is, it's a complex matrix, and all of a sudden you find yourself plugged into it and not sort of a stranger in this place. Yeah, it's definitely revealing.
Is there anything that maybe you perhaps learned while you were out experiencing life that maybe you could give advice to others for how to really be more in the present, or how to experience the life around them while it's happening and not allowing themselves to try to think of the future and the past and all of the things we were just talking about?
Yeah. There's probably, I guess there's a couple of different ways. I mean, obviously, I think the practice of meditation or daily meditation, even if it's short, is a great practice to kind of get in that mindset. And then, of course, trying to carry that into your daily life. Again, that ties into the kind of idea of trying to shut off the voice in your head, the constant chatter, and sort of learn how to turn that off and try and just experience things for what they are. again, it's easier said than done. And I think sometimes it is necessary, maybe not to go and do 3 months in the forest, but even to take a backpacking trip and leave your phone or something like that, because all of these things, like you said, instant gratification, they are made to be addictive. And it takes a lot of discipline to put them down in the first place so that you have space to experience everything else going on.
I have to say, my 18-year-old son, his phone broke a few months ago, and we sent it in to have it fixed. And it took them 2 months to fix it. And he said, Mom, I was without a phone for 2 months. You know how hard that is? So I think for him, that was just a really interesting lesson, because he's had a phone since he was 10 years old. When he was
Hmm.
in the 5th grade, I think they got their first phones. And I can't imagine, and I've talked to people about this, I can't imagine growing up in a society where that was always around, where you always had social media and you always had the phones, and
I
and
know.
and really, I feel sorry for them, because I think there's so many things that I, as a teenager or a young child, experienced that they never really got to, because all of the concern was over who's posting what on, you know,
Yeah.
Instagram or on Facebook. And I never had to worry about that. And I'm glad, because I'm sure that I probably would be really embarrassed by things that would have been posted by a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
So
definitely. And I
now,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say two things. One, even when we were in college, me and a couple of friends, we started doing these different challenges, and one was to not whip out your phone when you're in a public place, just because you're either bored or you feel awkward by not doing anything. A lot of times people whip out the phone because they don't know where to divert their attention. So they say, you know what, this is a safe space to do it. And I think doing little things like that are also a great practice. And all of a sudden, you do look around and you see everyone else plugged in so hardcore, but it also then opens up space for you to have sort of spontaneous interactions with people, whereas before your head was down, sort of out, keeping yourself out of the world that you're really in.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think that happens a lot. I think people are so, like you said, if they're on the subway or if they're on a plane or on a bus, whatever, it's constantly this, looking at their phones, and not, that's how you used to meet people and interact with
Yep.
people, was
Yeah.
because you were both stuck in this awkward situation together. So you make the time pass by talking. And so I think it's interesting that doesn't happen as much. And I don't know about you, but as a teacher, I see this all the time. I think that anxiety in children is so high right now. And I
Yeah.
think that is a big part of it, because social anxiety, they've never really had to learn how to make conversations in those, situations. And they're also constantly comparing themselves to other people. I see this on Facebook, and these people have a better life than I do. And of course, we know we only put our best
Yeah. Our
foot
best lives.
forward on, yeah, like, this is my best life. And a lot of times it's not even the truth, but a lot of
Yeah.
people post those things. And so I think that they feel the need to compare themselves with others. And that's a big problem that causes
Yeah.
anxiety too.
Definitely.
So that's my question to you too. So did you feel like when you were on this journey and you went for the 3 months, do you feel like your anxiety levels were lowered, or was it a different kind of anxiety because you were having to adjust to a life you were not used to?
Yeah. Great question. One so one thing, I guess one aspect that's really funny about that is, then I realized I was anxious while I was in the forest at times, because this was the first time I was sort of making a film, like a feature-length film. And I had to balance between doing all the things I needed for like daily survival, and then worrying that I'm getting adequate, coverage and shots, and if I'm doing it right and how I'm going to put it together. And then I remember just thinking, wow, if you can create that level of anxiety for yourself while you're alone in the forest, then clearly you can see that it's not just a product of the world around you, but it's your own head. You know what I mean? And I think even just witnessing that and acknowledging that then opened me up to sort of approach things differently.
I think that's a really good point too, because I think many of us, I say we create our own hells with ourselves, with our own thoughts and with our mindsets. And we do that. I mean, I'm very guilty of doing that sometimes myself. Like even today, I had to run to Walmart to get something, and I was like, oh, I hate having to go to the store because it's not just as simple. You can't just run in anymore and just go pick something up. It's like, oh, I have to get my mask. I have to, we have social distance, and I have to do all of these things. And our attitude could be, and it's a tendency to want to say, oh, I have to do this and this is terrible. But we're creating our own misery when we do that, instead of just saying, okay, well, this is just a thing. It's, I'll go in, get this. But I feel like a lot of people, because of what's going on around us, I just see so much more negativity from people, just from watching what people post on social media and, listening to other teachers talk. We're having to do virtual learning and listening to their conversations about this is so awful. And I think, we're just being shown, I think we have to make the best of a situation that isn't necessarily ideal, but our attitude about it and our mindset about it absolutely affects our reality. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, it was interesting after Maria, there are people whose their entire life, essentially, not their physical life, but all their possessions and everything was gone. Their house was blown flat. And so many times I met people. Dominica is a very Christian country, and it was so interesting meeting so many people in that stage still saying, sort of, give praise to God, and all of this happened, but thank God I'm alive. And it's just such a different way of seeing things. And I think it was quite enlightening for me to be going around the island and talking to people and to hear that so much. Again, it's just reframing your reality. Again, whether it's cup half full, half empty, it's just how you want to see things.
I agree with you. And I think we talk about this a lot on my show, but it's so important if you want, people say they're searching for happiness, and I had a discussion with a friend of mine the other day, and he said, well, which do you prefer? Do you prefer that I'm searching for happiness or I'm cultivating happiness? And I said, well, obviously cultivating, because searching looks like you haven't found it. And it's something that's always out of reach for you. Whereas cultivating it, you have it, you're just trying to do things to make it grow and blossom, and it's there. And I think that that's a problem that a lot of us, and I think is a very normal human thing, is that
Hmm.
we're always searching for that next thing that's going to make us happy, when in reality, we have to be happy. We have to choose to be happy. It's a choice that we have and that we make. And if, we're not feeling happiness, we need to think about what we're doing in our lives that maybe is causing the unhappiness, or what we're not seeing. I think it's really a matter of not seeing all of the blessings that we
Hmm.
already have.
Hmm. Now, so this kind of links back into the film, because this is sort of this is a question we ask ourselves personally, but then it was a question I wanted to start asking sort of for humanity at large, thinking about maybe where we were in the past and thinking about where we think we're going in the future. And I know a lot of people, to me, the sort of dominant narrative is that things are, well, maybe people are questioning it right now, but in general, that things are always getting better, that at some point, as humans, we're gonna become more and more essentially like gods, and we're gonna leave Earth and colonize the rest of the universe and all of that. I started kind of questioning that when you start looking at every other species that has existed on this earth and recognize that like 99% of them went extinct, maybe we are not the ones that are going to be the torchbearers carrying life throughout the universe. Maybe we're going to go extinct and something else is. Um, and so then I started thinking, you know what, maybe the answers are in the past, and we need to go backwards, and we need to go towards nature and all of these things. And I think kind of going through all of this, it is this sort of almost a circular type answer, where the answer is neither quite in the past or in the future. In many ways, the way I see it, these different paths all sort of lead in the same direction. Um, it's like as if you were going on two different directions in a circle. You're going to end up in back to the same place. And for me, that the circle also is just such a great, um, I guess, symbol, because for me, a circle, it's whole. And when I think of wholeness, I think of presence as well. But yeah, again, these are just, to me, these are the questions that I think we need to be asking as a species. Like, where are we going? And not just where are we going, where can we be satisfied? At what point will life be at a place where we're like, you know what, that's it. This is where we need to be.
I think that's a really, really great point to bring up. And I think so many of us are searching always for answers,
Mm-hmm.
and what is going to happen to us in 10 years, 20 years? I mean, who would have, if you ask, what's 2020 going to be like? I think that what the joke on Facebook is, everyone who answered the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 2015, got that answer wrong, because none of us like would have ever imagined that this would happen. But I truly do feel like it's all happening to teach us a lesson, and to
Yeah.
really change us as a society. And I think that it is. I choose not to be a doom and gloom person that, I have friends who equally will say, like, well, this is the end, this is it, this is the end of humanity, and this is everything being predicted, that it's all over. I'm like, I don't see that. I don't see it as that way. I think it's just another place in history where we're shifting.
Mm-hmm.
We just are experiencing a huge shift, and it's uncomfortable when you experience a shift.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, when you work on yourself and you change yourself, that's uncomfortable, but it's supposed to be. So
exactly.
Yeah. So is there anything else, any other words of wisdom or anything that you have for our audience today, or anything you would like to tell us about your film or the process?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, one interesting thing while I was out in the forest, I was actually reading the Bible for the first time, Buddhist scripture, and the Bhagavad Gita. And what seemed like on the surface quite different philosophies, in one there's one God, and one there's no God, and another there's many gods. When you really start kind of reading it a little deeper, it's really interesting seeing, to me, they're all different ways of writing about and accessing the very same thing. And of course, that the approaches and language is going to be different for different times and different places and different cultures. But if anything, it kind of confirmed to me that there is sort of this almost, I guess, absolute truth that can be tapped into and is worth taking the time trying to tap into. The other thing I would mention, I think just like you, I got into this path in an interesting way. I think I actually was in business school in Chapel Hill before I switched to film, and I actually switched in the middle of class. My business professor brought in a speaker who kind of just gave me a flash forward of what my life was going to be like if I was 40 continuing on the same track. And I just realized then that, not anything against business, but that track wasn't for me. And they asked me what was I going to do to put my life on track. And I raised my hand in the middle of class and I said, I'm quitting business school. And in a way, that was sort of the start of all of this. And I think it's just important. I think in many cases, each of us sort of have callings, whether it's vocational or even in terms of social responsibility, that it's just important for us to listen to. And I think once you start, instead of sort of fighting against life and maybe even your fate and your destiny, and you start working with it in many ways, it's like the universe seems to just keep opening doors for you.
Yeah, I would agree with you totally. I think we were talking a little bit before this interview, and I told you about how I started my podcast. And it was one of those points, I think, same thing, where you're in the business class and then saying, okay, this is not for me. In my life, I was like, okay, what I'm going through is not for me. There's something more out there. And I think that's what I was responding to, was this internal questioning of, this cannot be all there is to life. There has to be
Hmm.
more to life than just this. And that's what led me to my path. And I think there's so many people out there listening. In fact, I know they are, because they come to work with me for coaching, who really are afraid to take that leap. Like, they're you in that business course, but they don't raise their hand, and they don't get up, and they don't walk out, and they don't say, enough, this isn't the path that I want. Then there are a lot of people who, I think, because of fear of change, which it's a normal, natural thing to be afraid of change, they just sit where they are, ignoring the calling that they're getting, the calling of their heart. To me, I always think it's the universe, divine, leading you to the path, for your mission, or what you're supposed to be here doing, and your purpose in life, if you want to call it that. And I
Yeah.
think that there are a lot of people who just never fully realize their purpose, because they listen to the ego, I think, more than their higher self. So do you have any advice for people who may be feeling like, oh yeah, I know this is not where I want to be, but I'm not doing anything about it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of books that really helped me. Obviously, I read Eckhart Tolle's A New Awakening, but The Power of Now is also a great one. And um, Buddhist scripture, there's a great book. Um, I can't remember it now, but it's What the Buddha Said by Thich Nhat Hanh. What I love about Buddhism really is you can any of the sort of stuff that you would consider religious that you don't want to deal with, you cannot. A lot of it is sort of just philosophy about recognizing that ego, recognizing the impermanence of everything, and sort of accepting that and moving with that. Personally, it was maybe when I was about 17 or so that I started it hit me, you're gonna die. And that was the most terrifying thing. It like finally just hit me, you're gonna die. And it actually made it really hard to just even move through life, because it was like, well, all of this is pointless. But I had to go through that to then get the other side of the coin, which is that in many ways, yes, all of this is pointless. Essentially, it's an open game with very sort of flexible rules. You're going to be dead in 80, 90 years. So this is your only time, really. So make it count. And I really do think that the contemplation of death, which is something that is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, I think it's actually really important to then live a full life. I think that's what I'd say on that.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you that and it makes it more interesting, don't you think, when you actually do the things you're afraid to do. To me, whenever I've had things in my life where I thought, oh, I'm too scared to do that, then I thought, okay, you have to do it now, because you just told yourself that this is something that scares you.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's
exactly.
like facing the ego head on and going, okay, well, you're not going to scare me anymore. So,
Yeah, exactly.
and I would say for me, definitely going and spending 3 months living, in the forest and giving up a lot of things that you were used to, that is definitely something I think would scare a lot of people. So I commend you for doing that, and for making a film about it, because I love how when people document their own lives, it's so helpful to others too, because we can learn so much from other people's experiences. And it just looked beautiful where you were. First of all, it was a really, really beautiful area. And I love the conversations that you had with the people you were interviewing. And I'm going to have to go and finish watching it, because I didn't get to watch the whole thing. But what I started watching, I really, really loved. So I'm going to have to go and finish that later today. But thank you so much for sharing your experience, because like I said, I already learned a lot just from having this conversation with you and from watching the part of your film that I watched. So I know that this film is going to be so beneficial to so many people out there. I wish so many more people would jump on that instinct of facing their fears and doing the things that, you know, they feel called to do, just like you did when you felt called to make this film. So do you have any plans to make more movies anytime in the future?
Absolutely. Right now, actually, I'm working on my first fiction script, which I'm hoping to have the first draft done this year. This was the deadline I set for myself. Again, this was a next thing that seemed like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, well, I just proved to myself I could do the documentary. Let's push it. Even if I fail, hey, at least I gave it a shot. Um, so yeah, and also I'll just mention again, the film Uncivilized, it's streaming at studioanansi.tv. It's across social media at Uncivilized Film with a Z or Z. And we'll be screening at the San Francisco Indie Doc Fest, at the Grenada Film Festival, and at the Greater Cleveland Urban Film Festival as well. Yeah.
Awesome. And if there's a link for them to click on to get to the movie, I'm going to include that in the notes to this podcast so that if any of my listeners want to go and find your film, we'll make it easy for them to do that. So
Brilliant.
well,
Well,
I
it's
would
been
love to have you back sometime, if your next movie comes out and you want to come back, or even if you just want to come back and talk about life and, all of the things that you've learned along the way. I'd love to have you back sometime. So.
Yeah, anytime. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful talking to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys, and I want to thank you also for being here with us and for joining me on this podcast. As always, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a review from wherever you're listening. That helps others to find me, which helps me in my mission. So thank you for that. Also, if you want to work with me, you can go to my website, melissaoatman.com. There you'll find the list of services I offer. You can book a service directly from the offerings page. I do all of my sessions online through Zoom. And follow me on social media. I go live Mondays at 6:30 Central on Facebook, where I do a free card reading. If you show up for the live, I'll pull a card for you too. I hope that you guys have an amazing day from wherever you're listening. I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.